David Martinez sat in his corner office on the 32nd floor, staring out at the city below. The numbers on his computer screen told a story he didn't like. Customer complaints were up 15%. Employee turnover was hitting record highs, and somehow, despite all the meetings and reports, he felt more disconnected from his company than ever before. As the chief financial officer of Sunshine Grocery, David had climbed the corporate ladder quickly. At 38, he was proud of what he'd accomplished. The company operated 47 stores across 3 states, employed over 2,000 people, and generated millions in revenue each quarter. But lately, something felt off. The spreadsheets showed profit margins, but they didn't show the human side of the business. His assistant knocked and entered with another stack of reports. "The monthly performance reviews are ready for your signature," she said, placing them on his already cluttered desk. David picked up the first report and frowned. Store number 23 in downtown Phoenix was underperforming again. Low customer satisfaction scores, high employee sick leave, and declining sales. On paper, it looked like a management problem, but David had a nagging feeling there was more to the story. That evening, during his drive home through the city, David made a decision that would change everything. Instead of heading to his usual route through the suburbs, he took a detour past Store 23. The parking lot was busier than he expected for a Tuesday evening. Through the large windows, he could see employees and customers moving around like pieces on a chessboard, but from his air-conditioned car, they were just silhouettes. He realized he had no idea what actually happened inside his stores. When was the last time he'd had a real conversation with a cashier? When had he last seen how customers really behaved, or understood what employees dealt with every day? The next morning, David called his HR director into his office. "I want to go undercover," he announced. Linda raised an eyebrow. "Undercover? Like a spy?" "Like an employee," David corrected. "I want to work in one of our stores for 2 weeks. See what really happens on the ground level." Linda looked concerned.
"David, that's unusual. What if someone recognizes you?"
David had already thought about this. Most store employees had never seen him in person. His photo wasn't hanging in break rooms, and he rarely visited stores during regular operational hours. "I'll go to Store 23 in Phoenix. Use my middle name, Roberto. Say I'm a new hire who recently moved from out of state." The plan took a week to arrange. David would work as a stock clerk, starting at 7 in the morning. The store manager, Kevin, was told that Roberto was a temporary employee, helping out during their busy season. Linda handled the paperwork, creating a simple background that would hold up to casual conversation. On his first day, David arrived at the store at 6:30 in the morning. He'd traded his usual business suit for jeans and a plain blue t-shirt. His hands, usually soft from pushing papers, would soon learn what real work felt like. Kevin met him at the employee entrance. "You're Roberto, right? Welcome to the team. It's going to be a busy day." The store was already alive with activity even before opening to customers. Employees were restocking shelves, checking inventory, and preparing for another day of serving the community. David had seen these activities in reports and surveillance footage, but being in the middle of it felt completely different. His first assignment was working with Miguel, a 22-year-old who'd been with the company for 3 years. Miguel was patient, showing David how to properly stock shelves, rotate products, and read the inventory system. "The trick," Miguel explained, "is to keep everything looking perfect even when you're running behind. Customers judge us by how the store looks." As the morning progressed, David began to notice things that never appeared in his reports. The way employees helped each other without being asked. How they remembered regular customers' preferences. The small acts of kindness that happened dozens of times each day. But he also noticed something else. During the busy morning rush, when customers lined up at the registers, David observed the cashiers. Most of them chatted easily with customers, smiled, and handled the constant pressure with grace. But one cashier stood out. Her name tag read Maria, and she worked at Register 3. She was probably in her late 20s with kind eyes and dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. What caught David's attention wasn't just her efficiency, though she was clearly good at her job. It was something in her expression. Even when she smiled at customers, there was a tiredness in her eyes that reminded him of his own mother during the years when she worked 2 jobs to support their family. Maria arrived every morning at exactly 6:45, 15 minutes before her shift started. She used this time to organize her register, check with other employees about any issues from the previous day, and prepare for the morning rush. David noticed she never seemed to rush even when things got hectic. During his lunch break on the second day, David sat in the employee break room with Miguel and a few other coworkers. The conversation was easy and natural, covering everything from weekend plans to complaints about the broken air conditioning in aisle 7. "Maria's having a tough time lately," mentioned Jenny, one of the other cashiers. "She's been picking up extra shifts whenever she can. Is everything okay with her?" David asked, trying to sound casual. Jenny shrugged. "She's got a little girl. I think she's just trying to make ends meet, you know. Single mom life is tough." David filed this information away. He'd started paying more attention to Maria's behavior, not in any invasive way, but with the kind of awareness that comes from recognizing something familiar. Her dedication reminded him of employees he'd read about in performance reviews, the ones who consistently received good ratings but somehow remained invisible to upper management. Throughout his first week, David began to understand the rhythm of the store in a way that quarterly reports had never shown him. He learned that Tuesday mornings were unpredictably busy, that elderly customers preferred shopping early in the day, and that Friday evenings brought tired parents rushing through with their children. He also learned that his employees were much more observant and capable than any management report had indicated. They handled difficult customers with patience, solved problems creatively, and supported each other in ways that created a genuine team atmosphere. But it was Maria who continued to capture his attention. Not because she was struggling exactly, but because of how she handled whatever challenges she faced. She never complained, never seemed overwhelmed, and always maintained her professional demeanor. Yet David's trained eye for numbers and patterns began to notice small details that told a different story. She never bought anything from the store during her breaks. She always brought her own lunch in a small brown bag, and every day she seemed to check her phone during quiet moments with the concentrated attention of someone monitoring something important. By the end of his first week undercover, David realized this experience was changing his perspective in ways he hadn't expected. The store wasn't just a location generating revenue. It was a community of people, each carrying their own stories, struggles, and dreams, and somehow, Maria's quiet strength had become a puzzle he was determined to understand. David's second week as Roberto the stock clerk brought new insights every day. He'd grown comfortable with the physical work, his hands no longer soft and uncalloused. His back ached in the evenings, but it was a different kind of tired than the mental exhaustion he usually felt after long days in boardrooms. The morning rush had become familiar routine. David would arrive early, help Miguel and the other stockers prepare for the day, then spend his time ensuring shelves stayed organized as customers picked through products. But increasingly, he found himself watching the front of the store during quiet moments. Maria had become a constant in his peripheral vision, not because he was trying to spy on her, but because something about her daily routine struck him as different from the other employees. While his coworkers chatted about their plans, their families, their weekend activities, Maria remained quietly focused on her work. It was Wednesday of his second week when David first noticed something unusual about Maria's lunch break. The store operated on a rotating break schedule, with employees taking their 30-minute breaks at different times to ensure adequate coverage. Most employees went to the break room, a small area behind the customer service counter with a few tables, chairs, a microwave, and a refrigerator. David had eaten lunch there every day, usually joining Miguel and a rotating group of coworkers. The conversations were easy and comfortable. People shared stories about their families, complained about difficult customers, or talked about movies and television shows. It was the kind of natural workplace bonding that David had never experienced in his corporate environment. But Maria never joined them. At first, David assumed she preferred to eat alone, or maybe she had errands to run during her break. Lots of people used their lunchtime to make phone calls or handle personal business. But as the days passed, he realized Maria's absence wasn't occasional. It was every single day. On Thursday, curiosity got the better of him. When Maria left for her lunch break at exactly 12:30, David found an excuse to step outside. The employee parking lot was behind the store, a small paved area that faced a busy street. David pretended to check something on his phone while casually scanning the area. Maria was sitting in an older blue Honda Civic, parked in the far corner of the lot. The car looked well-maintained, but clearly had seen many years of use. Even from a distance, David could see she was on her phone, speaking to someone in what sounded like Spanish. There was nothing unusual about an employee making phone calls during break time. But something about Maria's posture caught David's attention. She was leaning forward slightly, her free hand gesturing as she spoke. Even though he couldn't hear the words, her body language suggested this wasn't a casual conversation. David went back inside, telling himself he was probably overthinking things. Everyone had personal calls to make. Everyone had family members to check on. There was nothing strange about preferring the privacy of your car to the busy break room, but the next day, Friday, the same thing happened. Maria left at 12:30 and David could see her in her car on the phone. This time he noticed she had a small brown bag on the passenger seat. The same brown bag she brought to work every day. During the weekend, David found himself thinking about Maria's routine more than he probably should have. As someone who'd spent years analyzing patterns and looking for details that others missed, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important. Monday brought the same pattern. Maria at her register all morning, professional and efficient with customers. Lunch break at 12:30, walking purposefully toward the parking lot while her coworkers headed to the break room. This time, David waited a few minutes before stepping outside. He positioned himself near the loading dock, where he had a clearer view of the parking lot but wouldn't seem to be watching anyone specifically. Maria was in her car again, but this time David could see more details. She had opened her brown lunch bag and removed what looked like a sandwich wrapped in plastic, but instead of eating it immediately, she was carefully unwrapping it, examining it, then rewrapping part of it. David watched as Maria took the sandwich and divided it in half. She rewrapped one half and placed it back in the bag. The other half she kept out and began eating quickly, almost mechanically, while continuing her phone conversation. The realization hit David like a physical blow. Maria wasn't just eating lunch in her car for privacy. She was rationing her food, saving half of what appeared to be her only meal for later, or perhaps for someone else entirely. David's mind raced back to the conversation he'd overheard in the break room. Maria had a daughter. Jenny had mentioned she was a single mother trying to make ends meet. The pieces of the puzzle began forming a picture that made David's chest tighten with recognition and sympathy. He remembered his own mother doing similar things during the hardest years of his childhood. Cutting her portions smaller so he and his sister could have seconds. Pretending she wasn't hungry when there wasn't quite enough food for everyone. The subtle sacrifices that children often didn't notice until years later. Tuesday brought another confirmation of David's suspicions. Same routine, same careful division of the sandwich, same quick consumption of her half while saving the rest. But this time David noticed something else. After eating, Maria spent the remainder of her break time looking at her phone, but not in the way someone scrolls through social media. She was clearly reading something, occasionally tapping and swiping with the focused attention of someone searching for specific information. David found himself struggling to concentrate on his work that afternoon. The image of Maria carefully saving half her sandwich kept replaying in his mind. As someone who regularly spent more on lunch than many people earned in a day, the stark reality of what he'd witnessed was hard to process. That evening, David sat in his own kitchen, looking at the well-stocked refrigerator and pantry that he usually took for granted. He thought about Maria's small brown bag, her careful rationing, and the quiet dignity with which she handled what was obviously a difficult situation. Wednesday confirmed what David had begun to suspect. After Maria finished her half sandwich, she spent her remaining break time on what appeared to be job search websites. David recognized the distinctive layouts of popular employment sites, the way someone scrolls through listings, the occasional pauses that suggest reading a job description. Maria was looking for additional work. The pieces of her story were becoming clearer, and David realized he was witnessing something that probably played out in employee parking lots across the country every day. People working full-time jobs but still struggling to make ends meet. Parents making sacrifices their children might never know about. Employees maintaining professional facades while privately fighting battles that their coworkers and managers never suspected. By Thursday, David had seen enough to understand that Maria's situation wasn't temporary or unusual. This was her daily reality. The careful rationing, the job searching, the quiet determination to make everything work despite obvious financial pressure. As he watched Maria wrap up her half sandwich and place it gently back in her bag, David felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about one employee anymore. This was about the disconnect between the corporate world he lived in and the real lives of the people who made his company successful. For the first time since starting this undercover experiment, David began to understand that the numbers on his spreadsheets represented real human struggles and triumphs that he'd never even considered. David knew he needed to be careful. His curiosity about Maria's situation was genuine, but he also understood that pushing too hard or asking too many questions would seem strange to his coworkers. After all, he was supposed to be Roberto, a temporary stock clerk, not someone conducting an investigation into employee welfare. The opportunity to learn more came naturally on Friday afternoon. The store had been unusually busy all day, with several large shipments arriving that needed immediate attention. David found himself working alongside different employees throughout the day, including helping to bag groceries during the afternoon rush when the regular baggers were overwhelmed. Maria was handling Register 3 with her usual efficiency, but David could see the stress of the busy day and the tightness around her eyes. When a particularly difficult customer spent 10 minutes arguing about a coupon that had expired months ago, Maria maintained her professional smile, but David noticed her hands trembling slightly as she processed the transaction. After the customer finally left, muttering complaints under her breath, David approached Maria's register with a bottle of water. "Rough day," he said simply, offering her the water. Maria looked surprised but grateful. "Thank you, Roberto. That's very kind." She opened the bottle and took a small sip, then seemed to catch herself and capped it again quickly. "I'll save the rest for later." The small gesture spoke volumes to David. Even a free bottle of water was something she felt she needed to ration. "Take your time," he said. "We're all feeling it today." Maria glanced around to make sure no supervisors were nearby, then leaned slightly closer. "Some days are harder than others, you know, but we push through." "We do," David agreed. "I'm still getting used to retail work. It's different from my last job." "What did you do before?" Maria asked, her voice showing genuine interest. David had prepared for this question. "I worked in an office. Numbers and paperwork mostly. This is much more real, if that makes sense." Maria nodded. "I know what you mean. I've done office work before, too. Cleaning offices at night, actually. You see a different side of the business world when you're emptying their trash cans at midnight." The comment was made casually, but it hit David hard. Maria worked a second job cleaning offices. That explained her tiredness, the careful attention to every expense. She was working around the clock just to make ends meet. "That must be exhausting," David said carefully. "Working 2 jobs." Maria shrugged, but David could see the weight of it in her shoulders. "You do what you have to do." "I have a little girl." "She's 8. Isabella. She's everything to me." The way Maria's entire expression softened when she mentioned her daughter told David everything he needed to know about her priorities. 8 is a fun age," he said. "She must keep you busy." "She does," Maria smiled, and for the first time since David had been watching her, the smile reached her eyes completely. "She's so smart. Always asking questions, always curious about everything. She wants to be a teacher when she grows up." "That's wonderful. She sounds special." "She is." Maria's expression grew more serious. "I just want to make sure she has everything she needs to succeed, you know? Good school supplies, clothes that fit, a safe place to live. The basics that every kid should have." David heard the worry in her voice, the unspoken concern that maybe she wasn't able to provide all those basics as easily as she wanted to. "I'm sure you're doing a great job," he said. "Some days I wonder," Maria admitted, then seemed to realize she was sharing perhaps more than she intended with a coworker she barely knew. "Sorry, I don't usually talk about personal stuff at work." "No need to apologize," David said. "Sometimes it helps to talk to someone who understands." The conversation was interrupted by another customer, but David felt like he'd been given a window into Maria's world. Over the next few days, he found small opportunities to continue building that connection. Nothing forced or suspicious, just the natural conversations that develop between co-workers who spend hours together. During a quiet Tuesday morning, while David was restocking shelves near Maria's register, she mentioned that Isabella's school was starting a new after-school program. It would be perfect for her, Maria said. Art and music classes help with homework. But there's a fee and I just can't swing it right now. David wanted to ask about the cost, about whether there were scholarships available, about a dozen things that might help. But he knew that pushing too hard would seem strange. Instead, he just listened. She's been asking about art classes for months, Maria continued. She draws constantly. On everything. Sometimes I find these amazing pictures she's drawn on the back of junk mail or old receipts. Maria laughed softly. I save every one of them. She sounds incredibly creative. She is. I just wish I could give her proper art supplies, you know? The good paper, the nice colored pencils. She makes beautiful things with whatever she can find, but imagine what she could do with the right materials. David filed away every detail. The after-school program, the art supplies, the financial constraints that prevented a talented 8-year-old from accessing opportunities that many kids took for granted. On Wednesday, David learned more about Maria's daily schedule. She worked at the grocery store from 7 in the morning until 3:30 in the afternoon. She picked up Isabella from school at 4, spent a few hours with her, then left for her cleaning job at 9 in the evening. She worked until 2 in the morning, got home around 2:30, and was up again at 6 to start the cycle over. When do you sleep? David asked, genuinely concerned. I grab a few hours when I can, Maria said. Isabella goes to bed at 8:30 on school nights. I have about 30 minutes to make sure she's settled. Then I head out for the cleaning job. I usually get 4 or 5 hours of sleep. It's enough. David did the math in his head. Maria was working nearly 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. The cleaning job paid cash, which probably helped with immediate expenses but offered no benefits or job security. The grocery store job provided some stability but clearly wasn't enough on its own. What about Isabella while you're working at night? She stays with Mrs. Rodriguez, our neighbor. She's elderly but very kind. She doesn't charge much for watching Isabella, just what I can afford. Maria's voice carried a note of gratitude. I don't know what I'd do without her. Thursday brought another piece of the puzzle. During their lunch break, Maria mentioned that Isabella's father hadn't been part of their lives for years. He left when she was 2, Maria said simply. Decided being a father was too much responsibility. We haven't heard from him since. That must have been difficult. It was, Maria admitted, but honestly, we're better off without someone who didn't want to be there. Isabella deserves people in her life who choose to love her, not people who see her as a burden. The strength in Maria's voice was unmistakable, but so was the underlying sadness. She'd been carrying this responsibility alone for 6 years, working herself to exhaustion to provide for her daughter without any support system beyond a kind neighbor. On Friday, David witnessed the moment that would haunt him for weeks to come. He was organizing inventory in the stockroom when he overheard Maria on the phone during her break. She was speaking in Spanish, but her tone was worried, apologetic. After she hung up, David could see she was upset. Everything okay? He asked. Maria hesitated, then said, Isabella's school called. She needs new shoes. The ones she has are too small, and they're saying it could affect her feet if she keeps wearing them. But payday isn't until next week, and she trailed off. And you don't have the money right now, David finished gently. Maria nodded, looking embarrassed. I'm a good mother, she said, almost defensively. I take care of her. It's just that sometimes the timing of everything... You don't need to explain, David said. Anyone can see you're an amazing mother. Isabella is lucky to have you. As Maria returned to her register, David realized he'd learned more than just facts about her situation. He'd witnessed the daily reality of a working parent who was doing everything right, but still struggling against a system that didn't make it easy for families to thrive. That evening, as David drove home to his comfortable house in the suburbs, he couldn't stop thinking about Maria's quiet strength and the 8-year-old girl who was growing up watching her mother work multiple jobs just to cover the basics. For the first time since beginning this undercover experiment, David understood that what he'd discovered wasn't just about one employee or one family. This was about the hidden struggles happening in the lives of people he'd never really seen before. Despite the fact that their work made his company's success possible, David's last day as Roberto the stock clerk felt heavier than he'd expected. As he clocked out for the final time, shaking hands with Miguel and the other co-workers who'd welcomed him over the past 2 weeks, he realized how much this experience had changed him. But it was his brief conversation with Maria that affected him most. "I hope your next job works out well for you, Roberto," she had said during their goodbye. "You're a good person. Isabella would like you if she met you." The simple kindness in her words and the fact that she'd mentioned her daughter stayed with David during his drive back to the corporate offices. Maria had no idea she'd just said goodbye to the chief financial officer of the company she worked for. She saw him simply as a co-worker who'd shown her friendship during a difficult time. Walking back into his corner office felt surreal. The polished floors, the expensive furniture, the view of the city from 32 floors up. Everything seemed different now. His assistant greeted him with a stack of messages and reports, but David found himself staring at the papers without really seeing them. The contrast was overwhelming. 2 weeks ago, he'd been concerned about profit margins and quarterly projections. Now all he could think about was Maria carefully dividing her sandwich in half, saving money for Isabella's shoes, and working 16-hour days just to keep their small family afloat. That evening, David sat in his home office surrounded by company reports and financial documents. But instead of reviewing quarterly earnings, he was researching something entirely different. He was looking into wages, cost of living, and the gap between what his company paid employees and what those employees actually needed to live comfortably. The numbers were sobering. Even full-time employees like Maria, who received what the company considered competitive wages, were struggling to afford basic necessities in many markets. The math was simple and brutal. Rent, utilities, food, transportation, childcare, and healthcare added up to more than most employees earned. Even before considering emergencies or unexpected expenses, David realized that Maria's situation wasn't unique. Across all 47 stores, there were probably dozens of employees facing similar challenges. Single parents, older workers, young people trying to build independent lives, all working hard but caught in the squeeze between rising costs and wages that hadn't kept pace. But David also knew that simply offering direct help to Maria would likely embarrass her and could create problems for both of them. Maria had pride, dignity, and strength. She wouldn't want charity, especially from someone she thought was just a fellow stock clerk. She needed opportunities, not handouts. Over the weekend, David developed a plan that kept him awake both nights, not from stress, but from excitement. He wasn't just going to help Maria. He was going to create changes that would benefit employees company-wide while ensuring that Maria and Isabella got the support they needed. Monday morning, David called an emergency meeting with his leadership team. The conference room filled with vice presidents, directors, and managers who expected to discuss standard business matters. Instead, David presented them with something unprecedented. "I've been thinking about employee retention and customer satisfaction," David began, not mentioning his undercover experience. "Our turnover rates are too high, and our customer service scores could be better. I believe the root cause is that we're not investing enough in our frontline employees." He clicked to his first slide. "I'm proposing the Employee Excellence Initiative. It's a comprehensive program designed to recognize outstanding performance while addressing some of the practical challenges our employees face." The room was quiet as David outlined the first component: performance-based bonuses. Not the usual token amounts, but substantial rewards that could make a real difference in employees' lives. The bonuses would be awarded quarterly, based on customer service scores, attendance, teamwork, and community involvement. "The criteria aren't complicated," David explained. "We want to reward employees who consistently go above and beyond for customers and coworkers, people who represent the best of what our company stands for." His HR director raised a concern about cost, but David had already run the numbers. "The investment will pay for itself through reduced turnover and improved customer satisfaction. Training new employees costs us more than retaining good ones." The second component was even more ambitious: flexible scheduling for parents and students. David proposed allowing employees to adjust their schedules around school events, childcare needs, and family emergencies without penalty. "We're losing good people because they can't balance work with family responsibilities," David said. "This program acknowledges that our employees have lives outside of work, and that supporting those lives makes them better employees." The third component addressed childcare directly. David proposed partnerships with local daycare centers and after-school programs to provide discounted services for employee families. The company would negotiate group rates and provide subsidies for employees who met certain criteria. Childcare costs are crushing working families, David explained. When our employees are worried about their children, they can't focus on their jobs. When they know their kids are safe and engaged in quality programs, everyone benefits. But David's most innovative idea was the fourth component: educational support. The company would offer tuition assistance not just for employees but for their children. Scholarships for after-school programs, school supplies, and even college savings matching programs. We're not just investing in our current employees, David told the room. We're investing in the next generation of workers and customers. The children of our employees today will remember how we treated their families. The leadership team was initially skeptical. The program represented a significant financial commitment with benefits that might not show up in quarterly reports. But David had done his homework. He presented data from other companies that had implemented similar programs, showing improved employee satisfaction, reduced turnover, and increased productivity. This isn't charity, David emphasized. This is smart business. Happy employees create happy customers, and happy customers drive profits. It took 3 weeks of meetings, budget revisions, and planning sessions, but David's team approved the Employee Excellence Initiative. The legal department worked out the details, HR developed the application processes, and David personally oversaw every aspect of the program's design. The beauty of David's plan was in its structure. Maria would qualify for multiple components of the program based on her genuine performance and circumstances, but she wouldn't be singled out or made to feel like she was receiving special treatment. The bonuses would be awarded to several employees across all stores. The scheduling flexibility and childcare support would be available to any employee who needed them. David made sure the criteria for the first round of bonuses were written in a way that Maria's performance over the past year would make her an obvious candidate. Her customer service scores were consistently high. Her attendance was perfect despite her challenging schedule, and several customer compliment letters specifically mentioned her by name. But David went even further. He contacted local elementary schools and community organizations, arranging for the company to sponsor school supply drives and after-school program scholarships. When Isabella's school received a donation of art supplies from Sunshine Grocery, it wouldn't seem connected to Maria's employment. It would just be a fortunate coincidence that the company happened to support education in the community. David also worked with the store manager to create a display featuring employee artwork and family photos. When he learned that Isabella's drawings were as talented as Maria had described, he made sure the store would be eager to feature them in their community showcase, which came with a small prize for participating families. The final piece of David's plan was the most personal. He arranged for his assistant to research after-school programs in Maria's neighborhood, then worked with the company's community outreach coordinator to sponsor several scholarships specifically for the children of Sunshine Grocery employees. 3 weeks after returning to his corporate role, David had transformed his emotional response to Maria's situation into a comprehensive program that would help not just her family, but potentially hundreds of other employees facing similar challenges. Now came the hardest part, implementing the program without revealing his connection to Maria's story. David knew that for his plan to work, Maria had to believe that her selection for the Employee Excellence Initiative was based purely on merit, not on the friendship she'd formed with a temporary stock clerk named Roberto. As David prepared for the program launch, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years of corporate success. This wasn't about profits or market share or quarterly reports. This was about using his position to make a real difference in the lives of people who made his company's success possible. The numbers on his spreadsheets were about to become stories of changed lives, starting with a hardworking single mother and her 8-year-old daughter who dreamed of being a teacher. 6 weeks after, David had last walked through the doors of Store 23 as Roberto the stock clerk. He returned. This time, however, he wore his usual business suit and carried a leather briefcase. His assistant walked beside him, along with the regional manager and store manager Kevin, who looked both nervous and excited about the unexpected visit from corporate leadership. David had spent the morning reviewing the first quarter results of the Employee Excellence Initiative. The program had exceeded every expectation. Employee turnover was down 18% across all stores. Customer satisfaction scores had improved significantly. Most importantly, the program had already identified and rewarded 47 outstanding employees across the company. Maria Santos had been selected for the largest bonus in the first round. As David walked through the store, he noticed improvements that went beyond what any report could capture. Employees seemed more engaged, more willing to help customers, more connected to their work. The atmosphere felt different, more positive, more like the community he'd experienced during his undercover weeks. David found Maria at Register 3, where she'd been working for the past 3 years. She was helping an elderly customer count exact change, patient and kind, despite the growing line behind them. When the customer finally completed the transaction and thanked Maria warmly, David approached the register. "Excuse me, are you Maria Santos?" he asked formally. Maria looked up, immediately recognizing that this was someone important from corporate. His suit, his posture, and the small entourage behind him made that clear. "Yes, sir. How can I help you?" "My name is David Martinez. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of Sunshine Grocery. I'm here because you've been selected for recognition through our new Employee Excellence Initiative." Maria's eyes widened. She glanced quickly at Kevin, her store manager, who was smiling broadly. "I'm sorry, sir, I think there might be some mistake." "I'm just a cashier." "There's no mistake," David said gently. "Based on your customer service scores, attendance record, and feedback from both customers and coworkers, you've been selected to receive a performance bonus of $5,000. The words seemed to take a moment to register. Maria stared at David, then at Kevin, then back at David. $5,000? She whispered. "That's correct. Additionally, you're eligible for our new flexible scheduling program, which will allow you to adjust your hours around family needs. We're also partnering with local childcare and after-school programs to provide support for employee families." Maria's hands began to shake. She looked around the store as if trying to make sense of what was happening. Customers in her line were smiling, having overheard the conversation. Her fellow employees had gathered nearby, clapping and cheering for her. "I don't understand," Maria said, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Why me?" David stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Because you represent everything this company should value. Your dedication, your kindness to customers, your work ethic. You deserve recognition for what you do every day." Maria covered her mouth with her hands, overwhelmed. The bonus alone would change everything for her and Isabella. She could quit the cleaning job. She could buy Isabella proper art supplies and sign her up for the after-school program. She could stop dividing her sandwich in half. Kevin stepped forward with an envelope. "Maria, this is your bonus check, along with information about the new programs. Take your time to look everything over." Maria accepted the envelope with trembling hands. I can't believe this is real." "It's very real," David said, "and it's well-deserved." As the crowd of employees and customers began to disperse, David lingered. There was something he needed to do, something that went beyond the official presentation. "Maria," he said quietly, "could I speak with you privately for a moment?" They walked to a quieter area near the customer service desk. Maria still clutched the envelope, her eyes bright with tears of relief and joy. David took a deep breath. What he was about to do broke every rule of corporate protocol, but he couldn't leave without her knowing the full truth. "Maria, there's something else I need to tell you. About 6 weeks ago, I worked in this store for 2 weeks. I was undercover trying to understand what really happens in our stores from an employee's perspective." Maria looked confused. "Undercover?" "I worked as a stock clerk. My name is David Martinez, but while I was here, I went by Roberto." The recognition hit Maria like a lightning bolt. Her eyes widened as she stared at David's face, seeing past the business suit to the person who had offered her water during a difficult shift, who had listened to her talk about Isabella, who had shown her kindness when she needed it most. "Roberto," she whispered. "You're Roberto?" David nodded. "I am. And I want you to know that your selection for this program isn't because of our friendship. Your performance genuinely earned this recognition, but I'd be lying if I said that knowing you, seeing your dedication and your strength didn't inspire me to create these programs in the first place." Maria stared at him in shock. The coworker who had been so kind to her, who had listened to her worries about Isabella, who had made her feel less alone during those difficult weeks. He was the chief financial officer of the entire company. "You listened to me talk about Isabella," she said, her voice barely audible. "About the art classes she wanted. About her father leaving. I did. And I was honored that you trusted me with those parts of your life. Your love for Isabella, your determination to give her every opportunity despite the challenges you face, that changed how I see this company and our responsibility to our employees." Tears were flowing freely down Maria's cheeks now. "I can't believe you're really here. I can't believe any of this is happening. Maria, you work harder than anyone should have to. You're an incredible mother, a dedicated employee, and a good person. This company is successful because of people like you, and it's time we started acting like it." Maria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "What you've done? This program, it's going to change so many lives." "That's the plan," David said, "starting with yours and Isabella's." 3 months later, David received a card at his corporate office. It was handmade, decorated with colorful drawings of flowers and rainbows. Inside, in careful 8-year-old handwriting, was a message. "Dear Mr. Martinez, thank you for helping my mom. She doesn't have to work at night anymore, and we get to eat dinner together every day. I got into the art program at school, and I love it so much. My mom says you're a good man. I drew you a picture of our family. The tall person is you because you're part of our family now. Love, Isabella." Attached to the card was a beautiful drawing showing 3 figures holding hands under a bright sun. David recognized Maria and Isabella, and the third figure, taller than the others, wore a suit and tie. David framed the picture and put it on his desk, right next to his computer monitor where he would see it every day. Whenever he reviewed quarterly reports or made budget decisions, Isabella's drawing reminded him that behind every number was a real person, with real dreams and real challenges. The Employee Excellence Initiative had grown beyond David's original vision. Other companies had started similar programs after hearing about Sunshine Grocery's success. The flexible scheduling had become a model for the retail industry. The childcare partnerships had expanded to include tutoring and mentorship programs. Maria had been promoted to assistant manager and was taking business classes through the company's educational support program. Isabella was thriving in her art classes and consistently made honor roll at school. The small family that had once struggled to afford basic necessities now had stability, hope, and a bright future ahead of them. But perhaps most importantly, David had discovered that true success wasn't measured only in profit margins and quarterly earnings. It was also measured in changed lives and opportunities created, and in the knowledge that business could be a force for good in the community. Every morning when David walked into his office and saw Isabella's drawing, he was reminded that the best business decisions were often the most human ones, and sometimes the most powerful changes began with simply taking the time to really see the people who made success possible.